Hello and welcome, Star Wars fans, to this week's episode of Duel of the Ranks, a show where debate takes so hot that they'd melt a planet with twin suns. My name's Brody, and I am joined by my co-host Amanda as we attempt to discover what story is truly the best from a galaxy far, far away. On this week's episode, we're going to be discussing ranks and hot takes from Ahsoka Part 3, Toil and Trouble, Trouble and Turmoil, something like that.
Time to Fly.
Really?
Yeah, that was last week.
I want over it. I want to talk about it some more. No, we're moving on to part 3. Regardless of my confusion, we're going to just blunder into this episode and we're going to talk about it. Raw thoughts, raw reactions, but we're not alone tonight.
We're not
alone. We have a guest.
We haven't had a guest in a while.
Uber is our guest.
The whole company?
No, my driver I was in Austin last week. And let me tell you, it was a very, very cool 105, 107 some odd degrees. It was beautiful. But I tell you, when I jumped in Bryan's vehicle and that AC was on, and next thing I know, he starts telling me that he's into Star Wars. Not only Star Wars, but the video game he streams more often than not is Star Wars Battlefront 2. And now people, you think like, oh, from like 20 years ago. Okay, yeah, that's awesome. No, the new one. He didn't give up on it. He's my spirit animal. We have him on tonight. I'm tired of talking about him. Let's just bring him in. Let's talk to Bryan, a.k.a. Varsity Scooter. Thanks for being here.
A.k.a. Brody's Uber driver.
That's what I like to be known as. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks for joining us. It's cool to have a real working class representation of guests on our podcast. So
yeah.
It is really funny because, I jumped in the car. When we jumped out, my coworker is with me, and he's like, Brody, you are the total salesman. You can't even, get out of an Uber without getting someone's phone number, getting him on your podcast. I'm like, this guy's awesome. We have to have him on the podcast. And especially after he texted me earlier this week and said, I listened to your show. I'm surprised it's actually good. I'm like, well, now you have to come on.
Thank you so much.
Now you have to come on. So anyway, all right, Bryan, before we get started and talk about this show, we got to introduce the audience to you. So we have a few questions. We asked a Star Wars Celebration. Now we ask every guest going forward. So Amanda, let's just start it off.
Who is the best Star Wars character?
R2-D2. It's not even close.
He's the best. Not even close.
He has so much personality just in the first movie alone, and he's just a little guy. He's just a little funny
I love
robot.
that answer. I love that answer.
Where does Chopper rank then compared to R2-D2 for you?
I love Chopper. He definitely comes from a different time and has a lot of personality as well. But I mean, just considering what they did in 1977 with the technology they had, and that Star Wars is told from R2's perspective, at least for the original 3 films. I think R2 has to take it for me.
Nice. Wow. All right. What is the best Star Wars film?
Empire Strikes Back. And it's just objectively true. I'm sorry. It's
a crowd favorite.
Yeah. I'm interested though, because I'm starting to hear more and more folks say Rogue One.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Which honestly, I mean, I wish more people would say Revenge of the Sith. Being born when I was born in the 90s, I was thinking that's everyone's favorite.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up, and then there's all these Gen Xers who are like, it's the worst.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I'm just going to keep my opinions to myself until more of us have a voice on the internet. All right. What is the best Star Wars TV show?
I agree with Amanda here. I've heard y'all's show before, and I'm a big Rebels sympathizer. I think Rebels is probably a top 3 Star Wars story for me, but by far the best story told in animation thus far.
Yes.
We'll see what happens.
Man after my own heart. I love it.
Yeah. Now we're going to say, we normally also ask about hot takes. We're going to save that for the hot take segment of the show. But I do want to ask kind of a new one. Is there one piece of Star Wars music that's just absolutely better than all the others?
A piece of Star Wars music?
Like John Williams, Ludwig Göransson, you name it.
I think the first thing that came to my mind is Padme's ruminations. It's so unique and so out there and so opposite of everything else Star Wars that it's such a powerful moment. That is the turning point of the saga too. It's It's
wow. So you have listened to the podcast before.
I've heard that song in my dreams.
You've heard me like rave about that part because yes, big
I
fan.
saw the website. Yeah. I saw that you had that up there as well. But that's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Nice.
Oh, wow. Well, I can honestly say I wasn't expecting that.
That's great. What a great intro to our guest.
Do you have a piece that you think is just the best, Amanda? I don't even know if I've asked you this.
Well, I mean, I walked down the aisle to my husband to Princess Leia's theme. So I have a little emotional connection to that one.
Yeah. I feel like it's got to be the Force theme. Otherwise, I'm going to die on this hill. I'm going to die on it. The special edition remake, you get rid of Yub Nub, you throw in Victory Celebration and titles.
I'm a Yub Nub truther.
I'm telling you, it's the best. So, all right. Well, let's go ahead. Let's dig right into it. Ahsoka Part 3, whatever its name is. Amanda, what was it all about?
All right, part 3, Time to Fly.
Oh.
Sabine restarts her training with Huyang and Ahsoka, but struggles to connect with the Force. On Home 1, Hera asks the Senate Committee for New Republic resources to track down Thrawn, but her request is denied. Meanwhile, Ahsoka and Sabine travel to Cetos to discover the Eye of Sion, Elspeth's hyperspace ring. Ahsoka and Sabine are attacked and lose power and escape to the nearby planet, hiding in the forest for cover.
That was such a fun episode.
Yeah, it was. That was kind of the first thing that I took away too. I was like, that was fun.
And I'm sorry, what's the composer's name for this again?
Kevin Kiner.
He's just, this felt like the music was, for me, the best part of this episode. It was so on brand, feeling like this was John Williams.
Yes, I was saying the exact same thing. First of all, it got a 9 out of 10 points from me. And I said the exact same thing. It feels so authentic to Star Wars.
Yeah.
Like even in like the space battles, like if it was shocking that it like wasn't John Williams. It was beautiful and perfect. And yeah, I loved it.
Wow. And especially that chase scene they had that felt like Star Wars, and even some of the corniness, like there are folks hating on like, Ahsoka, why the heck would she jump outside of the ship? And well, why didn't they shoot the other side that she was on? And this, I'm like, guys, we're asking these questions, and this is Star Wars.
Yeah,
we literally just saw space whales earlier. Like, let's just suspend the disbelief for a second. I've got a bigger problem with the fact that you could very visibly tell they were not drinking anything out of those little cups, those sake cups. There's totally not anything in there, but whatever. But Ahsoka on the outside of the ship didn't bother me. But what did you think, Bryan, when you watched this episode?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, I think the soundtrack is so far my favorite thing about this show. I will say that it's not only like reminiscent in the action scenes of John Williams, but it really pushes it into new directions as well. Like the intro theme is phenomenal. So the soundtrack is usually what leaves me like satisfied at the end of an episode. And I agree. This was a fun week. It was a fun episode. I felt like maybe not a lot happened. I don't want to be one of those guys that just says, slow pacing, because I like slow paced movies. I love, the Lord of the Rings extended version, and I just love that kind of style. And I think if it's building towards something, then it's going to be really worth it.
Yeah.
But it would probably be a lot more appreciated if the characters were a little more interesting, I think.
That's a good point. And I felt like this episode ends really abruptly. And it's a shorter episode among the other 2 that we've watched so far. So my expectation is that next week we're going into already the mid-season. So it's going to have to be a big episode in my mind emotionally. Like I feel like there has to be some type of big reveal or something that gets the second half of the series headed towards like a really exciting finale. And they've been really good about introducing, like we get Purgles in episode 3. Like we already have heard Thrawn. We got Jacen Syndulla, which we can circle back around to. But
I knew you were going to bring that up.
I've got some opinions.
He walked into the room. I'm like, run away. Amanda's already after you. Get out. Run, boy.
No, but like we're already almost halfway through. And then we end this episode with like Baylan Skoll being like, all right, get ready to hunt them out. And then it's like, that's the end.
As fun as this is, and this was a fun episode, I personally think it was the incorrect time to place it, because the first 2 episodes, most people, I think that did watch it, were like, okay, I wasn't expecting anything, and I'm intrigued. You have my interest. Then I think that this was an episode to really dive deep into the characters, and they did, to their credit, try to showcase more of Sabine and Ahsoka and what that dynamic is like. And I don't mind Ahsoka being more stoic at this point. She really felt like a Jedi Master.
And I think I did get a bit more expression from her this time. Like, you start to see her character change a little bit when she refocuses and she's like, I need to work with Sabine and we have to work together if we're going to get through this. I also felt like seeing Mon Mothma and that conversation with Hera and the Senate committee. Hera also gets really flustered and has to like rein herself in. So I do feel like the characters were trying a little bit more.
I think Hera had a lot more close-ups this time than normal. And when at this new 4K TV, I was watching it and I was like,
what did you think?
It's like, those contacts are
Intense.
a little bit, yeah, a little much.
I know, they're so intense that I honestly hate to bring it up because I don't want to ruin anyone else's experience about it.
Glass shattered for me.
But it almost feels like if they're even slightly off center of your eyeball, then it's going to look a little cocky.
Like a frog.
And
frog eyes.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just so, it just draws you in so much and it's so unnatural that
it's too much.
Bothering.
It's one of those things that I think CGI should be used for. It's called CGI. Use it on the CGIs. It would be so easy and look so good.
Right there.
But I don't want to keep like rehashing the same criticisms over and over again. But let's bring it back to Jacen Syndulla now. Those Kanan genes are working overtime because that child has like no Twi'lek in him, like whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like his hair is green.
Hair.
Where did the genetics come from that produced that?
Yeah, my wife was watching it with me and she's like, that's not his kid though, or her kid. I'm like, yeah, no, it totally is. She's like adopted. And I'm like, no. She's like, really? I'm like, yeah.
Because
I
green.
will say, yeah,
because
green. See, like the bright green hair, it's like similar, but also very different than the green that she has on her skin.
So now you know, if you're a human and you marry a Twi'lek, it's gonna look like you.
You have green hair.
And I think he has like little elvish ears, if I'm not mistaken.
No,
like
I guess we didn't see his ears in this one, but in the animation one, they're like really big and rounded. So I'm like, it's not even like a Twi'lek-y ear.
It'd be kind of like, they had to be careful with like what kind of monstrosity they were going to create with this baby.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But to be fair, I thought he was really cute and sweet. And I thought it was really fun that Chopper is the one that is supposedly watching out for him because that shows some character development on Chopper's part, which we didn't even get to address last episode. And that entirely is my fault because Chopper is my little baby and I forgot to really bring him up much. And, if he's, keeping Jacen out of trouble or at least keeping the trouble like under wraps, like I would love to see that.
Yeah. Well, one thing I want to actually combat you a little bit on. Last week, you said that the end titles, whatever.
Yeah.
That animated thing they have where it's like they're going across the stars and kind of making a map out of this constellation. You said it was like Game of Thrones, and for that it was tacky and not creative. I now so wholeheartedly, having not watched Game of Thrones, disagree. I didn't at the time, I didn't think much about it, but I've went back and there are people on Reddit, and in fact New Rock Stars, if you go watch them on YouTube, they have a video where they actually, it's this like new language based on, we believe, this ancient people we saw maybe from like the first episode, but we didn't know what this language meant as they went from planet to planet to planet. Well, after doing, like, they think they figured out a few letters, and they were able to basically piece by piece figure out the rest through cross elimination and kind of mapping out what all planets either that they're going to visit in this show. And it was pretty crazy because you do have Mandalore in there, you have Dathomir, you have, and like Yavin 4 is like right next to Dathomir, so like, which was, I mean, maybe they took liberty with that, but it's still super cool in a creative way to get to the very last planet, which I'm Palin's thought, I don't even remember what it's called, but anyway, that wherever they're going, that's and it's a pretty neat way to do that. And
I stand by my opinion about it feels like it rips off Game of Thrones. Bryan, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but I've also had other people tell me since the episode came out that they agree with me, that it's kind of like it's just been done so many times. I think Rings of Power also had like a similar vibe too, and it wouldn't bother me so much if the music that went along with it wasn't like doom doom, like the big drum thing.
Well, like Daredevil did it, The Crown does it.
Yeah,
it's this item or this thing that you see it a lot.
It's a little tired.
For me, it works because I hate how so many of those it's like purposeless. But this, you're actually following something. It's this journey to the last planet. So it's kind of like episode by episode. It's like, and it gives people credit for doing their research to see like, oh, where are we going next? So it's, I don't know. It's kind of fun. What do you think, Bryan?
Yeah, I'm only partway through Game of Thrones at the moment, unfortunately. I do agree that this show so far is very reminiscent of it and inspired by it, but I think more so in the fact that there's this power vacuum, which I believe Filoni and Favreau said, when they were setting up season 3, which is going to be the main conflict, right, is that there's these different Imperial factions and people serving only themselves. And I really hope that after the next episode, they really start diving into that internal conflict within the Imperial remnant factions. That's very Game of Thronesy, and the design of it itself, like the armor, especially with Balin and Hati, like their design is so cool. But it's still so grounded in Star Wars, but clearly evoking, Game of Thrones type majesty and mysticism and all that stuff.
Oh, and there's so much lore baked into those two characters. Like even by their definitions, like we see that there's one planet, there's like, I think it's called Odin, and there's another one next to it. And the definitions like of these people and the definitions of Balin Hati will go back to, I think, this Norse mythology with wolves.
Yeah.
And there's all this other wolf stuff that ties back into it. And yeah, Dave Filoni just loves wolves. And
we got Loth wolves, like when are they gonna
like all of these things are coming in together. And I'm like, one thing's for sure, the story's going to be pretty solid. The characters, we'll see. I mean, we'll just see how this all plays out. But my goodness, this man bakes so much.
He's cooking
into his show. It's like with all of these things, I'm like, man, this is
Chef Filoni.
It's very like Lord of the Rings for me, the most like Lord of the Rings that Star Wars has ever been, because instead of just having this story, they usually have like, there's some cool immersive stuff, but like with this, I feel like even with the end credits, as I was just saying, there's a lot that you can peel back. Whereas I don't feel like I watched Game of Thrones, but you don't get that with Daredevil or The Crown, just that item. Whereas this is like, what does this mean? And why did they say this? And to understand that more, you have to go understand Norse mythology and understand like so much of Lord of the Rings is written the same way, and you peel it back in these layers. So yeah, I'm still super excited for what's coming. That to be said, my goodness, the characters are weak, so unbelievably weak. And I mean, I think from a 1 to a 10, I gave the characters this week, 5.8 because it's passable. But my goodness, like, and I understand, I'm fine with her being stoic, but there's really not a lot I care about. I don't care about any of these characters besides Balin right now.
Yeah.
Like, that's insane. And we're almost halfway through. I care about the story, but right now it feels like these characters are just here to like move the story along. I'm not bought into any of them. And like everyone used to say like, oh, what if Ahsoka battles Anakin on Mustafar and this and this? I'm like, well, right now that doesn't feel organic at all.
Yeah.
I don't care about her at all. In this, like I just said, this alone, separating her from Clone Wars and Rebels, if I'm just watching this, why should I care about any of them? And so I hope something changes. But right now, that's feeling a bit hollow for me.
Yeah, I want to talk about the spacewalk moment, right? The infamous one. When it happened, my first reaction was like my jaw dropped. I was like, this is cool. Question mark. Cool. But it kind of furthered my I've been holding this opinion, and I would like it to be proven wrong, but thus far my opinion still stands that it seems like they just created Ahsoka to be live action just because they could, and that scene particularly felt like one that would have been better animated. Like just thinking of moving through space, and
it was a bit cringy.
Being able to show, because they could only really show like 3 different angles, and if you had like the freedom of animation, you'd be able to make a lot more cuts and splices and make that a lot more dynamic, I think. But it was cool. Like I'm not trying to take Star Wars too seriously. It was cool. And I liked how the ship, like when it's ready to bring Ahsoka back in, it starts to like help bring the floor to her, and she like does her like cool little maneuver to get back in the ship. I was like, okay, that's cool. But also when she came out with a helmet that had a home for each of her Laku, I was like, wow, that was a fast change. Like, you should be on Broadway.
Yeah, it was fast.
I think it's a vacuum seal is what it is. It's just like one of those mattress packages, just whatever your head shape is, it just conforms.
KG's in the comments. She agrees with us too.
Yeah, I don't know. What do you think about the characters and how they're being used, Bryan?
Yeah, I think the characters are the best example of kind of my overall sentiment about this show. And again, like Amanda, I hope to be proven wrong, which is that it would have been better in animation. You know, that moments like that especially would be more believable and fun and engaging, you know, with animation and the work you can do just within the, you know, digital cameras and stuff. But also just the characters' expressiveness is really what's lacking. I think the characters are interesting. In fact, I relate very deeply to Ahsoka on a very personal, spiritual level. Having grown up in a very controlling religion and left it, I was really excited to see her explored more. And they're kind of poking it with a stick a little bit. And I'm sure they'll get to all that philosophy stuff, but it's just, if it was Rebel season 5, even I would take the original animation, honestly, even in all its weakness. Like, I would take that over what we have now, but I hope to be proven wrong.
And also, like, the idea that if it was animated Rebel season 5, we would have definitely gotten more than 8 episodes. So it wouldn't feel like we're just like hanging on, like, okay, is it going to be like as good as it's supposed to be yet? You know what I mean?
I still fully sit here like Star Trek. Like, we're going through and watching Deep Space Nine. Like, what is it? 26 episodes a season, 25. And I'm like, and people would say, well, it's because it's so expensive. It's like, it doesn't have to be though. Like, we don't need some of the sequences. Like, what makes Star Wars when it's at its best is the characters.
Yeah, it's expensive, but they're not even using that money to pay their own writers and actors.
Thank you.
You can use, well, I'm saying, like, you can use more limited sets. You can use less sets. You can be less ambitious with all of that. Tell a better story, focus more on the characters. Now, look, it could do all that. But right now, I think we totaled out this episode. And looking at the numbers here, I gave it a 72%. You gave it an 84%. So the average 78%. The second episode 75. First one was 79.7. So it's
still as much as we're like discussing the criticisms because it's part of our show. It's still really fun Star Wars. Like, this feels like the most authentic Star Wars has been since like almost season 1 of The Mandalorian. You know, it just is really, I don't know, it just brings a lot. I think the music really is what is carrying me through it though, and gets me emotionally there with the series.
The music is phenomenal. So yeah, I'm still on board with it. I'm still enjoying myself, but it hasn't had that it factor that's propelled it to where Andor resides.
All right. Do we think we move on to our next segment?
Any last thoughts, Bryan, before we move on to hot takes?
No, I think that there's going to be a turning point in the next episode. It seems that that's clearly what they're leading to. They're all in the same place. They're setting up the pieces. They're all on the same planet. There's going to be this big conflict, and episode 4 is when the turn is going to happen, and then the story actually is going to.
What do you think that turn looks like? What do you think that consists of?
My guess is that Thrawn has taken over that other galaxy completely. He's been there for like 10 years at this point, right? It's 7 years post Return of the Jedi, which is 3 years post Rebels season 4. So there's been a lot of time. There's got to be lots of stuff happening in that time period, and I think that whatever we find on that other side of the the hyperspace lane or whatever is going to be incredibly new and inventive and exciting for Star Wars. Maybe introducing the Yuzong Vong, I don't know, but we'll see.
I would love that. I would love that.
I don't even like the EU, but I would love to see it.
Yeah.
There is one kind of prediction I want to maybe assume for next episode, because I thought it was interesting how Shin Hati is directing Maruk, an Inquisitor. And I know that obviously the Inquisitors report to Darth Vader, but it's interesting that Baylan and Hati are both sort of like dark Jedis. Like they're kind of in this weird, they are Force wielders using lightsabers, but they're not Inquisitors, but they're not Jedi, but they are working for the bad side. So when I saw that, like she as sort of like a Padawan was giving directions and that Inquisitor was taking them from her, I was intrigued at where that hierarchy falls in line. And I wonder if this next episode, do we get Darth Vader? Because he knows that, like, I don't know.
I mean,
Maybe.
we know Hayden Christensen. I mean, if all I will say is if we get him back as a Force ghost, that would be insane. But
whatever it is, it'll be great.
Whatever we get,
whatever it is,
happy with it.
I'm already happy with it.
I am interested on his character though, Maruk, because I know there was a lot of folks who were excited that Sam Witwer was going to be in it, and it was going to be some version of his Force Unleashed character, Starkiller. So I don't think that's what we're going to get. I think he's probably his own character, but I was wondering a lot, and I probably was reading too much into this, when he did speak this episode and she told him to do something, whatever, and he's like, as you wish. I wondered, I was like, was that in like an Easter egg for us to like pick something out? Was that like a hint, or was that him just talking?
Princess Bride reference?
Yeah, exactly.
No, I thought that too. I was like, it's Carrie Elwes. As you wish.
Because we've had Darth Vader say it.
Yeah.
And we've had
so romantic.
The clones say it, yeah, to each other. So yeah, I don't know. Overall, I don't really care who it is. Do you have any like hopes or expectations for Maruk?
Somebody's guessed that it's been Starkiller, and I think we all need to shoot that down. Sorry, KG. I know it's not. I mean, it's out there in the sphere, but Starkiller as like a character is just so canon breaking. It'll never happen.
I think they'd have to nerf him a lot.
But then at that point, then it's like, why? You know, it's not the same person then.
I think that's what some folks were saying. They're hoping is it's Sam Witwer, but what they do with him is like, yeah, he learned under Darth Vader. He was supposed to be same thing as Starkiller, just not with as many powers. And it's more about that story of here's this lost soul post-Empire. He was supposed to be, you know, take Luke Skywalker's position or something. But I don't know. If he's that powerful, why is he reporting to some barely Jedi Padawan?
Yeah,
so
it's not Jacen Syndulla. We ruled that out.
Yeah, it's not Jacen, thankfully. Some people think it's Ezra.
I mean, we haven't seen Maruk and Jacen in the same room at the same time, so.
And I do want to say, you know, at the beginning when they have like the doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo, that sound, and it's like they show all the helmets and faces. Whenever it's a hero, for the most part, it has a blue light flicker across. And whenever it's a villain, it usually has a red. Did you notice for this episode, Maruk had a blue light flash in front of him, and Sabine had a red light flash in front of her? Curious if Sabine does end up getting to use the Force at some point, but
she
ends
like
up going
force
dark
choke
side.
someone?
Yeah.
That'd be so cool.
And Maruk flips to the good side. Turns out Maruk's a double agent and is Ezra.
I feel like we're putting way more work than the writers did on this. Like we're going hard right now.
The writers were like, man, if we only cared half this much.
Yeah.
No, they care.